Before you reach for your coffee this morning, I want you to answer one question, honestly. When you woke up today, did you feel like something needed you? Did you have somewhere to be? Something that would actually notice your absence? If that answer came slowly, or if it didn't come at all, I need you to stay with me. Because what I'm about to show you has nothing to do with your diet, nothing to do with what's on your prescription. And it may be the single most important thing a senior over 60 will ever watch. Because right now, there are seniors in their 80s and 90s, not famous people, not wealthy people, who are sharper, stronger, and more functionally independent than most people half their age. And the difference between them and everyone else has almost nothing to do with their genes. Here's what drives me to make this video. Your doctor checks your blood pressure. Your pharmacist checks your refills. The checklist says, take your medication, walk for 30 minutes, get your colonoscopy. Nobody on that checklist asks whether you still have a reason to get out of bed. And that omission is costing people their independence, their cognition, and even their lives. Researchers who have studied thousands of older adults over many years have repeatedly observed something remarkable. Some seniors do everything right. They take every pill. They show up to every appointment. They avoid the salt shaker. And they still decline, steadily, quietly, in ways no prescription ever seems to touch. The medical system is running on autopilot. It tracks your numbers. It manages your conditions, but it has almost no language for the inner machinery that actually drives whether your body and mind respond to any of that or don't. Today, I'm going to give you that language. Before I do, where are you watching from? Drop your city and your age in the comments right now. I read these and I want to know who's in this room with me today. Now, stay with me, because trait number 3 on the list I'm about to share is something I have never seen another channel explain at this level. It operates at a neurological level. It changes the way your brain responds to stress. And most people over 60 have never been told it's even trainable. I'll get there, but you need the foundation first. Without it, this list will just sound like motivation. It isn't. Let me start by dismantling the belief that quietly kills more senior health outcomes than almost anything else. The belief that your biology is your destiny. My mother had dementia, my father died at 72. Oh, it's in my genes. There's only so much I can do. We hear these beliefs all the time, and there is nothing to be ashamed of if you've ever felt this way. But here's what the science actually says. Twin studies published through the National Institutes of Health suggest that genes account for approximately 20% of the average lifespan. 20%. Let that sink in for a moment. The remaining 80% is influenced by lifestyle, environment, and, critically, the psychology that determines whether someone actually follows through with those healthy behaviors, or quietly gives up on them. Let me use an analogy to explain it more simply. Your genes are the car you were handed at birth, the model, the make, the engine size. But your mindset, your psychology, determines whether you ever turn the ignition, whether you pull out of the driveway, whether you keep driving when the road gets harder. You can be handed the most reliable car on the lot and still leave it sitting in the garage. That's what a fixed psychology does to an otherwise capable body. And here's the mechanism most people miss. A fixed mindset, the belief that decline is inevitable, that change isn't possible after a certain age, doesn't just feel defeatist. Research suggests it can reduce the likelihood that you'll attempt new habits, respond to health information, or stick with difficult routines. The belief itself can influence your behavior, and over time, those behaviors shape your health. The healthiest 1% of seniors didn't simply win a genetic lottery. They turned the ignition and kept driving using a specific set of psychological traits that researchers have studied, that can be developed over time, and that are available to every one of us, starting today. Here are the 5. Trait 1, engineered purpose. Not accidental purpose, not the vague sense of being a good person. Engineered purpose, deliberate, specific, externally anchored meaning that makes your continued functioning a requirement, not a preference. NIH-funded prospective cohort studies tracking adults across decades have consistently shown that a strong sense of purpose in life is associated with a lower risk of death, even after accounting for physical health, income, and other factors. Purpose remains a powerful predictor of healthy aging. But why does it matter? How are the two connected? Let's try to deconstruct that connection. Purpose doesn't work simply by making you feel good. Research suggests it is associated with healthier stress regulation. Adults with a stronger sense of purpose often show more regulated cortisol patterns under stress. They're less reactive, and they recover more quickly. Your nervous system behaves differently when it believes your continued presence matters. The functional question is not, do I have purpose? It's this, is there something that would notice your absence within 24 hours? A person, a role, a commitment. Not a hobby, an obligation that belongs to you. A 28-year longitudinal study found that adults with lower purpose in their 60s had significantly higher rates of dementia by around age 80. This isn't simply about mood. It's about long-term cognitive health. Purpose has become an important factor that aging researchers continue to study, yet it rarely appears on a standard medical checklist. Trait 2, the health tribe. Not a social life, not a large group of friends. A health tribe? A small, committed circle of 2 to 5 people whose behavior and presence directly reinforce your own. I really like a quote from Jim Rohn. He said, "You become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with." Blue Zone's research identified a remarkable social structure in Okinawa called the moe. Small groups of friends who commit to supporting one another for life, checking in regularly, sharing resources, and holding each other accountable. Here's what makes this more than just a feel-good story. Research has found that social isolation is associated with higher levels of inflammation in the body, with health risks comparable to well-known risk factors like smoking. Loneliness isn't simply an emotional inconvenience. It has measurable effects on physical health, including faster cognitive decline, weaker immune function, and a higher risk of early death. The question isn't whether you have people in your life. The question is, do you have 2 to 5 people who would call within 24 hours if you didn't show up? That's the threshold, that's the tribe. Trait 3, growth mindset, as a neurological operating system. This is the one I flagged earlier, and I want to be precise about why it belongs here, because most people hear growth mindset and think motivation, optimism, a positive attitude. That is not what this is. Research specifically examining growth mindset in older adults in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, shows that it produces documented changes in how the prefrontal cortex processes new challenges. It reduces depression, it improves well-being, and, critically for these reasons, it determines whether a person adapts to new limitations, or simply surrenders to them. Think of it this way, your brain right now is running an operating system. A fixed mindset operating system receives a new physical limitation, a bad knee, reduced stamina, slower processing, and categorizes it as evidence of terminal decline. It stops attempting, the hardware starts going unused. A growth mindset operating system receives the same limitation and searches for an adaptive workaround. How do I garden differently? How do I drive more safely with slower reaction times? How do I stay in the game with a modified version of the game? This is not attitude, this is a trainable neurological posture, and Blue Zone elders who live into their 90s and 100s show it consistently. They don't deny their limits, they root around them. Trait 4, deliberate stress regulation. The healthiest seniors are not low-stress people, they are people with a trained thermostat. This distinction is critical because the standard advice tells seniors to avoid stress, reduce stress, and that advice applied to real life often produces anxiety about stress itself, which compounds the physiological problem. Here's the correct frame. You cannot remove heat from life. What you can control is how hot your inner room gets when the heat arrives and how quickly it cools. Blue Zone centenarians across cultures practice consistent daily downshifting rituals. Prayer, breathwork, time in nature. These are not wellness habits. They are cortisol management protocols, and they produce measurable differences in stress reactivity and inflammatory load over time. A 10-minute daily reset, performed consistently at the same time, changes the baseline your nervous system returns to after stress. The consistency is the medicine, not the specific technique. Trait 5, integrated grief. This is the insight almost nobody in this space addresses, and it may be the most practically important one on this list. Every senior watching this has experienced loss. Spouses, friends, siblings, roles, identities, versions of themselves that no longer exist. This is not incidental to health. It is a central biological variable. Research on aging and mental health, including data from the American Psychological Association, shows that roughly 1 in 4 older adults experiences significant depression or anxiety, despite most reporting good mental health overall. The gap between those numbers represents people carrying grief, without naming it as a health issue. Unprocessed grief maintains your nervous system in a state of chronic, low-grade threat activation, the same cortisol dysregulation that accelerates cognitive decline, the same inflammatory load that weakens immune function, the same withdrawal that erodes your health tribe and your sense of purpose. The healthiest 1% of seniors don't process grief faster than everyone else. They treat it as a health behavior, something that requires active engagement, acknowledged by name and often shared with a trusted other person. They do not wait until they feel ready. They schedule it the same way they schedule a walk. I want to tell you about Gerald. Gerald is 72 years old, a retired auto mechanic from Dayton, Ohio. He has lived alone since his wife passed away 3 years ago. He still drives himself to the grocery store and insists on it. He takes his blood pressure medication every single morning without fail. By every checklist measure, Gerald was compliant, responsible, doing everything right. He declined anyway. Minor accidents at home, nothing serious, but a pattern. He stopped taking his evening walks. His appetite dropped. He told his daughter he just felt flat. His doctor adjusted his medications twice. Nobody asked Gerald what he was living for. What Gerald had lost wasn't physical capacity, not yet. What he'd lost was his social role, his sense of being needed, and the daily structure that had been built around another person. His purpose had been engineered around his wife, and when she was gone, the scaffolding came down. The fix wasn't pharmacological. Gerald joined a car repair mentoring program at a local vocational school, 2 mornings a week, teaching teenagers what he'd spent 40 years learning. Then he joined a men's Thursday group at his church. Within 4 months, his daily structure returned. His mood stabilized. His daughter was thrilled. Interestingly, he called her one morning just to talk about a student who had figured out a fuel injection problem on his own. Last December, Gerald drove himself to his granddaughter's school play and carried her flowers in from the parking lot without stopping once. That is not a feel-good story. That is purpose functioning as a measurable biological intervention, and it never appeared on a single prescription. Here's how to activate all 5 traits, starting tonight. I'm calling this the Sovereign 5. Every step begins with what you already have in your home. Step 1, the purpose anchor. Every morning, write 1 sentence. Today I am needed for right specific purpose in the blank Canva. Fill in a specific name, role, or commitment, not a value, not an aspiration. Something that would notice your absence. Just 90 seconds, pen and paper, that simple. Step 2, tribe contact. 1 meaningful contact per day, minimum, not a text. A voice or a face. Your target is 2 to 5 people who would notice within 24 hours if you went quiet. If you can't name them today, that is your most important health finding from this video. Step 3, the micro-challenge. 1 physical or cognitive task slightly harder than what you defaulted to yesterday. Stairs instead of the elevator. Carrying your own groceries, doing the mental arithmetic at checkout instead of watching the screen. This is not exercise. This is a daily signal to your nervous system that you are still adapting. Step 4, the downshift window. 10 minutes, the same time every day. Breathing, prayer, or a gratitude practice, writing down 3 specific things. The technique matters less than the consistency. This is your cortisol thermostat reset. Step 5, the monthly grief check. Once a month, not daily, not weekly. Ask yourself, is there something I'm carrying that I haven't named out loud? If the answer is yes, name it to 1 person before the month ends. This single habit separates the 1% from the rest. Now listen carefully, because what I'm about to share could save you years of trial and error with your health. If you are experiencing persistent low mood lasting more than 2 weeks, noticeable memory changes alongside withdrawal from meaningful activities, or a major life transition, bereavement, retirement, or a new diagnosis within the last 6 months, please speak with your physician before self-directing any of this. What I've described today is not personal medical advice. Some of what I've outlined may bring up challenges that benefit from professional support, and seeking that support is itself a sovereign 5 behavior. Here is what I want you to do over the next 18 hours. Tonight, write the sentence, "Tomorrow I am needed for so and so." Put it somewhere you'll see it before you check your phone. 40 seconds. Tomorrow morning, read it before you look at anything else. Then before 10 a.m., make contact with one person from your tribe. Not to discuss this video, just to be in contact. 2 actions, that's the ignition your body has been waiting for. That's not a morning routine. That's you taking back the steering wheel of your health like the top 1%. If something in this video felt like information you've been waiting for, tap subscribe. If not, you'll probably forget this channel existed by tomorrow. Share this with one person in your life who is doing everything right, the medications, the appointments, the diet, and still feels like something is missing. And remember, none of what I've described today requires more. It requires the right things in the right order, at the right time. Take good care of yourself. I'll see you in the next one.